What comes to mind when you hear the name Camilla Parker Bowles? To the public, she now stands as King Charles III's wife, the Queen Consort. Yet for much of her life, her reputation carried far heavier shadows. Branded as the interloper, the woman who appended a royal love story, the rival who broke the illusion of a modern fairy tale and was destined to walk forever in the haunting glow of Princess Diana's legacy. For 30 years, one man carried the weight of her secrets: Andrew Parker Bowles, the husband she left behind. He endured the humiliation, the whispers, and the rewriting of history. Their marriage ended in 1995, but his silence endured. Until now. From a quiet Wiltshire cottage in 2024, Andrew broke the silence, not with bitterness, but with a heavy truth that shook the monarchy. "People deserve to know what really happened," he said. "Not the fairy tale, but the cost of Camilla's hunger for power." His revelations struck like thunder. Overnight, newspapers and television exploded. Social media turned into a battlefield of speculation. Within palace walls, emergency meetings ran long into the night. For the first time, the crown's carefully polished facade had been pierced by the testimony of the one man who knew Camilla better than anyone. To understand, we must go back. In the glittering 1970s, Andrew and Camilla looked like aristocratic perfection, the officer and the radiant debutante. Their wedding in 1973 was hailed as the event of the decade. But behind the photographs and champagne toasts, cracks had already formed. Camilla's heart had never fully belonged to Andrew. Years earlier, she had shared a brief but burning romance with Prince Charles. That spark, Andrew would later realize, was never extinguished. It became a fire that consumed their marriage. Andrew tried to hold his family together. He believed love, children, and loyalty could anchor Camilla. But her ambitions grew sharper with time. Charity events became excuses, phone calls ended abruptly, social outings turned into carefully staged performances. When their children, Tom and Laura, were born, Andrew thought motherhood might tether her. Instead, they became props, living proof for a woman sculpting the image of a perfect consort. Tom and Laura carried the heaviest wounds. Laura remembered childhood as a series of expensive gifts wrapped around absence, dolls arriving in place of her mother's presence. Tom, older, discovered letters between Camilla and Charles, and with them, the realization that his life was being choreographed for someone else's crown. "We were there when it suited her," Tom recalled. "But once the cameras turned off, we became inconvenient reminders." The toll was brutal. Andrew could shield neither himself nor his children. Birthday parties turned into political gatherings, holidays into photo opportunities. Their family became a stage. And in the shadows, Princess Anne, once close to Andrew, tried to warn him. "She's not just having an affair," Anne said in 1989. "She's running a campaign. Every photo, every word, is part of it." At the time, Andrew dismissed it. But years later, he admitted and had seen what he refused to believe, that Camilla had chosen power over family long before the world caught on. By the early 1990s, the facade shattered publicly. The Camillagate tapes leaked, humiliating Diana and exposing Camilla's role. But the scandal's cruelty didn't stop with adults. In 1993, Diana's young son William confronted Laura Parker Bowles at a charity event, his voice breaking, "Your mother is destroying my family." Two children, both innocent, were scarred by the choices of their parents. Yet, in that storm, Diana's response revealed the difference between the two women. She reached out to Andrew, offering compassion and urging that the children be shielded from further pain. "Our children shouldn't bear the consequences of our mistakes," she wrote. It was a gesture of grace that Andrew never forgot. Diana, facing her own betrayal, still thought first of the children, his and hers. Camilla, meanwhile, focused on her public image and her path to Charles. This is the truth Andrew finally chose to speak, that Camilla's journey to the crown was never just a love story. It was a calculated campaign, a relentless pursuit that cost her husband, her children, and even her humanity. She became queen consort, but at a price too devastating to ignore. And now, with Andrew's voice echoing across Britain, the world sees not just the queen beside the king, but the woman behind the crown, ambitious, unyielding, and willing to sacrifice everything for power. Diana's voice was calm but unyielding, cutting through years of Andrew's denial like a blade. "I can't change Charles, just as you can't change Camilla," she told him, her words stripped of illusion. "But we can protect our children. They deserve parents who put them first." That single conversation shattered the fragile shell Andrew had been hiding in. What began as William's attempt to heal Laura's wounds became something greater. The realization that some parents choose ambition over family, while others sacrifice everything to shield their children from destruction. Diana's example gave Andrew the courage he had long lacked. He admitted what he had feared to confront, that his marriage was nothing but a facade, and silence in the name of appearances was nothing more than betrayal of his children. By the winter of 1994, the storm could no longer be avoided. Camilla returned from Highgrove restless, her double life fraying at the seams. For the first time, Andrew did not stay quiet. Fueled by Diana's wisdom and the pain etched on Tom and Laura's faces, he asked the question he had buried for years. "What do you want, Camilla? Charles, the throne, or both?" The words cracked the walls of pretense. For a fleeting moment, Camilla looked as if she might offer the usual assurances. Instead, she unleashed the truth with chilling finality. "Andrew, you were always temporary. I was never planning to stay here forever." Her words gutted him, but the true devastation came when Laura stepped into the room. At just 16, she had heard everything. Her mother's dismissal of their family as a mere inconvenience struck deeper than any betrayal. Andrew saw the tears streak her face and felt the weight of his own cowardice. "Laura's tears are the price of my silence," he later confessed, vowing never again to let his children suffer for the ambitions of others. The divorce battle of 1995 laid Camilla bare. Despite her indifference toward Tom and Laura, she fought for custody, not for love, but for image. In court, the children's voices destroyed her carefully crafted persona. "I want to stay with Dad," Tom said, his words steady. "He's the one who's always been there." Laura's truth was sharper still. "My mother never wanted us. Dad is my home." Their testimony obliterated Camilla's public mask of maternal devotion. The court sided with Andrew, but the true victory was moral. His children had chosen honesty over pretense. In the years that followed, Andrew rebuilt his life. His remarriage to Rosemary Pittman in 1996 marked a turning point. Gone were the hollow halls of aristocratic ambition. In their place came a farm in Wiltshire, horses, and the laughter of grandchildren. For the first time, Andrew tasted peace. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," he explained. "It's refusing to let old pain poison your present." Even Charles and Camilla's 2005 wedding did not reopen his wounds. Watching Camilla in her bridal gown, he felt not bitterness, but relief. Her choices no longer had the power to wound him or his children. Yet silence carried its own price. For decades, Andrew protected his children by shielding them from scandal. But as years passed, he watched history rewrite itself, painting Camilla as a loving mother and grandmother while erasing the scars his children carried. "I thought I was protecting everyone by staying quiet," he admitted. "But in truth, I was protecting a lie." By 2024, he broke his silence, not for revenge, but for truth. "Every crown carries a price," he warned. "The question is whether it's paid by the one who wears it, or by the innocent hearts trampled along the way." His revelations ignited global debate. Was the Charles and Camilla story really about love conquering all, or was it ambition disguised as romance? Hashtags exploded across social media, voices rising with long-suppressed questions. At Kensington Palace, William's response was quiet but profound. The truth didn't just shift public perception of Camilla, it served as a reminder that every title, every polished image, has a hidden cost. And Andrew's words became both warning and hope. Warning against unchecked ambition, but hope that future generations, like William and Kate, could choose differently. By putting their children before protocol, they had already begun to prove that royal duty need not demand broken hearts. Tom and Laura survived their mother's ambition, Andrew concluded. But not every child will be so fortunate. If my story saves even one family from being sacrificed on the altar of power, then breaking my silence will have been worth it. His testimony closed not as a tale of bitterness, but as a call to conscience. In the ruins of betrayal, Andrew found clarity. Family must come before ambition, truth before image, love before power. And in that choice lay a lesson for kings, queens, and all who follow them. I see in William something I wish I had possessed earlier, Andrew reflected, the courage to defy expectations that threatened the well-being of his family. Diana would have been proud of the father he had become. His words struck a chord far beyond the gilded walls of the palace. Across Britain, families grappling with their own battles between ambition and responsibility found a mirror in Andrew's confession. It was not ambition that defined true strength, he insisted, but the ability to choose love over legacy. That message, simple yet devastating, reshaped the conversation about the monarchy and its crumbling facade. But not all eyes turned toward William. Camilla's shadow loomed heavier than ever. The deeper her entanglement with King Charles became, the harsher the scrutiny grew. Her past was never far from public memory, a tangled web of whispers, scandals, and choices that critics argued disqualified her from ever being queen. Each step forward in the royal household dragged behind it the weight of her history, a constant reminder that her claim to power was built on contested ground. Supporters said she had proved herself steadfast and loyal, yet her detractors would never let her outrun the ghosts of her past. The storm reached its crescendo when her title was stripped away. What should have been a quiet, internal matter erupted into a national spectacle. News outlets dissected the palace's decision, branding it either a desperate attempt to preserve integrity or an unnecessarily brutal punishment. Across households and television debates, one question lingered: had the monarchy crossed a line, or had it finally taken the bold step it should have taken years ago? The timing of the decision made the shock even sharper. It came on the night meant to celebrate unity and power, the coronation feast of King Charles III. The palace glittered with chandeliers, polished silver, and the laughter of dignitaries. Yet beneath the velvet gowns and toasts to longevity, tension pulsed like a hidden fault line. Princess Anne, always the family's steel backbone, could no longer hold her silence. She had tolerated Camilla's presence, but she could not ignore the creeping influence that, in her eyes, threatened to fracture the monarchy itself. In front of Britain's aristocracy, Anne confronted Camilla. It was no hushed aside, no whispered rebuke, it was a direct, public reckoning. Her words sliced through the grandeur of the night, denouncing Camilla's overreach and warning that tradition itself was at stake. Gasps filled the hall. For the first time, the conflict within the monarchy was not cloaked in discretion but laid bare for all to see. The room, frozen in silence, witnessed and drive a wedge that would change the course of history. The palace acted swiftly the next morning. Camilla's title was gone. Her years of painstaking effort to win legitimacy collapsed overnight. The announcement rippled across Britain and beyond, setting off frenzied speculation. Some hailed and as a defender of royal honor, others condemned the move as ruthless betrayal. Even seasoned royal watchers were staggered by the speed and severity of the decision. For Camilla, it was the most brutal of ironies. After decades of being branded an outsider, she had clawed her way into acceptance, only for it all to unravel in one decisive stroke. Her dismissal exposed more than a personal defeat. It revealed the monarchy's fragility, the cracks long papered over by ceremony and smiles. Now, those cracks had widened into chasms. As the dust settled, new questions emerged. How would King Charles endure without his closest ally at his side? Would Anne's influence harden into dominance? Or would William and Catherine, symbols of a modern monarchy, rise further into prominence? The royal family had endured scandals before, affairs, betrayals, even abdication. But this was different. This was not private sin exposed. It was a public unraveling at the highest level, a revelation that the monarchy itself was fractured from within. The decision marked not merely the end of Camilla's contested reign but the beginning of a perilous new chapter. The monarchy, once a symbol of endurance, now stood at a crossroads. Would it adapt to survive? Or would it collapse under the weight of its own traditions and secrets? The world, breathless and unblinking, waited for the answer. The monarchy had always symbolized stability, but Camilla's removal tore through that illusion like a storm ripping the crown from its pedestal. For the first time in decades, uncertainty consumed both the palace and the public. Whispers spread across the nation. Who would rise to fill the void? Would Catherine ascend prematurely as queen consort? Or could Princess Anne, fierce and unyielding in her devotion, carve herself into the center of a new royal order? Anne's sudden surge of influence was undeniable. For years, she had been the family's tireless workhorse, the one who labored without complaint. Yet her fiery confrontation with Camilla had shifted everything. Some hailed her as the one who halted Camilla's unchecked ascent, others condemned her for tearing open a fracture that could never heal. Either way, the princess's shadow now loomed larger than ever over the monarchy's fragile stage. King Charles found himself trapped in a cruel paradox. The monarchy he had spent his entire life preparing to lead was suddenly fractured, its aura of permanence cracked under the weight of betrayal, ambition, and age. His health wavered, his grip on the throne seemed increasingly symbolic. The future of the crown no longer rested in his hands, it belonged to William and Catherine. For William, this was the reckoning. The heir no longer had the luxury of waiting. The world demanded proof that he could lead a monarchy gasping for relevance in a modern world. Strength, wisdom, and steel were expected of him, yet every move he made was dissected with merciless scrutiny. Kate, equally burdened, stood poised to step into her role sooner than expected. She carried the impossible task of preserving centuries of tradition while reshaping the monarchy into something that could survive the tidal wave of change. The family was at a crossroads. Tradition alone could no longer save them. They had to evolve or crumble. Yet amid this transformation, Camilla's silence thundered louder than any proclamation. Once inseparable from Charles, once relentless in her quest to prove herself to a hostile public, she began withdrawing into the shadows. Some saw her retreat as dignified resignation, others whispered it was a quiet rebellion, her refusal to bow to the rising influence of William and Kate. Her absence, however, was no mere pause, it was a statement. For decades, Camilla fought for legitimacy, clawing her way into acceptance, only to see her influence dissolve overnight. To supporters, her retreat reflected grace under humiliation. To critics, it was a surrender, the final admission that she had never been truly embraced by crown or country. The media feasted on her silence, dredging up her past sins, reminding the world of the scandals that had haunted her from the beginning. Old wounds reopened. Diana's ghost hovered heavier than ever, her memory weaponized against the woman who had once been vilified as a usurper. At 75, on the cusp of her coronation, Camilla found herself reduced again to the margins, overshadowed by the very figures she had fought to silence. For Charles, the blow was devastating. He had relied on her loyalty through decades of ridicule and scorn. She had been his shield, his confidant, the anchor in his storm. Now, as her presence faded, he leaned increasingly on William and Catherine, and with every step they took into the spotlight, the monarchy itself shifted irreversibly toward their control. William's vision of a modern monarchy stood in stark contrast to the traditions Charles and Camilla clung to. Reform and openness replaced rigid ceremony, winning over a restless generation but deepening fractures within the family. Camilla, once the steady hand at Charles's side, became an outsider in her own house. Her retreat was not simply personal, it was the monarchy itself breaking into two visions, the past and the future. Supporters of the crown held their breath. Could William and Catherine carry the torch without shattering it? Or would Camilla's withdrawal prove the first domino in a collapse too great to reverse? The truth was clear, the monarchy was bleeding, and the wound was internal. Camilla's fall was not just her own, it was a signal of an institution teetering at the edge of reinvention or ruin. The question that haunted the nation was no longer if the monarchy could endure, but how much more it could break before it finally snapped. Her steady presence once kept Charles grounded, a shield against the relentless storms of duty. But her sudden withdrawal now leaves a void, one that threatens to deepen the fractures within the monarchy. Charles, worn by years of battles both public and private, sees his son stepping forward with growing strength. William is no longer just the heir, he is the living symbol of the monarchy's survival, the figure the public clings to as the future looms closer than ever. Yet for Charles, balancing loyalty to his wife with faith in his son has become the most agonizing trial of his reign. Camilla's retreat has split opinion. Admirers paint it as an act of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to protect her sanity after years of enduring the shadows cast by Diana's memory and the unforgiving gaze of the public. But to critics, her absence reeks of waning influence, a queen consort slowly being pushed from the stage while William rises to dominate the narrative. To them, this isn't a quiet break, it is a surrender, one that reveals the power struggle tightening its grip on the palace walls. For Diana's loyalists, the shift feels almost like poetic justice. William, Diana's son, is ascendant, adored by a generation that sees him as the monarch who might finally bridge the gap between tradition and modernity. His popularity grows stronger with every step he takes into the spotlight. His dedication to charity, his ease with the people, his ability to embody hope where others have only carried scandal. Yet, for all his acclaim, the silent tension with Camilla lingers like a storm cloud, a reminder that the family's deepest wounds have never fully healed. Charles's health now casts a long shadow over every move. The gradual passing of duties to William is no longer a distant inevitability but an unfolding reality. Each decision made now reverberates with historic weight. Will Camilla re-emerge to reclaim her ground, or has she already ceded the stage to a younger, more popular power? The monarchy stands at a knife's edge, its future shaped by choices made in whispers behind gilded doors. The world waits, watching a dynasty transform before its eyes. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this unfolding royal saga.